Welcome to Curious Coaching, the Sport Northern Ireland podcast for coaches who are driven to explore new ways, thirsty for new ideas, and passionately curious about how they can maximise the power of sport through great coaching. The podcast that seeks not to answer coaching questions, but to provoke them.
Hello and welcome to the Curious Coaching Podcast with your host Michael Cook and myself, Simon Toole. Today with us we've got Steafan Deery and Christine Russell. I'm going to invite them to provide a little bit of an introduction to themselves to get started. So Steafan, tell us a little bit about your coaching, what you do in sport, and just give us a bit of an understanding about you.
Thanks for having me on, boys. Delighted to be on. So in terms of my background, it sort of intertwines with both of you at several points. I come from a sporting family, went to school where pretty much got that passion for sport and in the community and stuff. So went on to my undergrad in sports studies at Ulster University, and then subsequently got positions with the Tyrone County Board as a sports development officer. And after a brief period there, went to the IFA through the sort of Department of Education that once they had set up a curriculum sports program in 2008. So worked there for 10 years in primary schools as a PE specialist, looking or coaching children the whole PE curriculum from foundation stage right to key stage 2, P7, and did some coaching as well in special needs schools. And on top of that, then my sort of evening role was slightly different. So during the day it was more of participation objectives. In the evening it was more sort of performance. So working Club NI and the player development program with the IFA over several years. And as well as that, I did some sort of coaching with local clubs in the Castlereagh area where I'm from. And my own business as well that I had for a period of time there, One Goal, where I felt there was a need sort of to develop children at the very early years, that there wasn't really things out there for them to get them into that sporting sort of foundation. So developing those sort of fundamental skills for children from like 3 to 8, 9 years of age, and then sort of recommending the journey that they maybe go on, whether it's the football or rugby or athletics, and sort of giving their parents a wee bit of support that way too.
Thanks, Steafan. And what's your main focus at the minute then?
In terms of coaching at the moment, everything's probably like everybody else has been curtailed, not doing any coaching. Last year I was working with IFA in a part-time role in the player development programs, and I've something sort of in the offing, hopefully now whenever I get started again. But most of my coaching at the moment is working just with senior team in Castlereagh and Gaelic, doing some of that. So bit of a crossover between football and Gaelic. But in terms of actually currently not doing any coaching, sort of involved with Michael and doing a PhD at Ulster University, and that's taken up quite a bit of my time.
And how, Steafan, the PhD, what are you looking at? And that's got some impact into your coaching, I guess.
Yeah. So I'll think there's a point later we'll maybe speak about that. But in terms of what it's on, it's looking at like team dynamics, team climate, that social environment in sport. Looking at performance and health outcomes, which traditionally we've kind of been looking more performance outcomes in sport, and it's only sort of in recent times we've started chatting about mental health and well-being. So the research that I'm looking at is trying to see, can we deliver both? I'm currently looking at transformational leadership and social identity leadership, and the group dynamics. So looking at how maybe like models of teamwork and stuff like that, how we can use that for maybe workshops here in Northern Ireland and elsewhere. They try to make coaches more aware of I was like saying now we need to have like a hybrid. So you have to adapt your leadership to different age groups, different sports, different styles. So for me, it's not a case of one size fits all. That you need to have like a toolbox of resources of So I'm very sort of interested in the different things that we can take from each type of leadership at the minute. So specifically transformational and social identity ones there.
Brilliant. Thanks, Steafan. Great stuff. I'm sure we'll dip into some of that stuff as we go through as well, because there's definite links, as you say, between some of the stuff in the recent Jean Côté session that you both came along to and what you've described there. So, Christine, I've known you for a fair amount of time now. We'll not say how long, but Christine, talk us through, I suppose, your journey into coaching and then what you do now with your coaching business.
Yeah, no worries. Well, firstly, I just want to say thank you so much for having me on. So like you said, my name's Christine Russell. Throughout my playing days, I played 20 odd years for Armagh Hockey Club, Ulster and Ireland at junior level. And within my playing days, I was very lucky to have some really good coaches in Mick McKinnon and Niall McCool. And these two really helped shape my career big time. So now I run a successful hockey business, which is called CR Hockey, and that's from schools coaching to drop-ins, one-to-one sessions, summer camps, academies. I coach Armagh Under 15 performance team, and I am the assistant coach of the Ulster Under 16. Now, throughout my day, going to school just more about participation and, you know, the score, okay, and then as we go into the Under 15 performance in Ulster, then it comes a wee bit more performance training. So there is quite a mix there between the two.
Brilliant, Christine, thank you. And I know we've got Mick in common too, and definitely somebody who's coaching I must admire. So I'm sure I can see some commonalities, I think, in both your approaches, which is a good thing.
Yeah, he probably taught me most of what I know, to be honest. So yeah, all good.
Yeah, well, I didn't have him as a coach, but certainly as a coach educator in the sport of hockey, that's definitely somebody I would have said has informed a lot of what I do too. Hopefully, he's not offended by that.
No, I don't think he will be, but he is a very, very good coach. And what I like, he's very approachable now. Like if I have anything or I need any help, like he's just a call away, and he's always willing to help. So no, he's been very good.
No, definitely agree. Great, Michael.
Guys, thanks for sharing your infos there. Really interesting to see some of the similarities in terms of the different environments that you're both working in. So, you know, that participation, you know, getting to the stage where you just want them to fall in love with sport and keep participating and really enjoy their experience. And then I think you both said in the evenings, it becomes then a little bit more performance focused or development pathway focused. My first question to you is around what's making you curious right now. That's our staple question on the podcast. We're always really interested to know what makes coaches curious. What are they eager to learn about? And Christine, can I ask you first, is there anything that's piquing your interest or making you curious in the coaching world right now?
Yeah, well, one thing I'd be very curious about is how can I be a better coach? And sometimes I look at how other coaches are doing things. And I think it's really good that we have the social media now where we can follow other coaches, other hockey clubs, and just see how they do it. I'd be very curious to see what sort of warm-up drills are doing, what drills are doing. Can I learn from them? And that doesn't have to be hockey. I mean, there's lots of football drills that I've watched and have transferred into hockey. So I'm always curious about how other people do it. They do it different from me. And then also, I would be on a group of other coaches and we share experiences on the coaches and drills and things like that. And I think that's very important to keep the connection between coaches and for us to share ideas, because at the end of the day, it's in the best interest of the players that we're all coaching. So yeah, I'm very curious about others and how I can learn lots of new things to bring on to the next generation.
And you mentioned that community of practice that you're in currently. Are you constantly using that to, you know, pick up the phone and speak to other coaches and try and find out that information that you're looking for?
Absolutely. It's a wee bit harder now because there hasn't been any hockey, but I haven't played hockey in a couple of years. But what I do, I would go and watch hockey matches, you know, and just look at their press, look at their outlet and things like that to learn as a coach and those things, because I'm very conscious is that most of my work is with primary school kids, and then going from that step from primary school then into that bit of performance. it is a little bit harder, and you're like, I mean, I'm always trying to, the primary stuff is easy. I don't actually know how to do it. I just do it. But the performance side of things is always that wee bit, it's more technical, it's harder. So I try to learn as much as I can to be as good as I can.
It's really interesting to hear you say, I don't know how to do it, I just do it. Is that something you've ever sat down and reflected on? As a coach, just going, what skills and qualities you are bringing to that environment that make it feel easy to you?
Like, see him in the playing, like, people say, Christine, how do you do that, or how do you do this? Honestly, and it's the same in coaching, is that I just do what I do, and I've never really sat down and think, am I good or whatever. But what I look at then is that anything that I do run is so supported. Like, I mean, everything is always full to capacity, and the kids seem to like it. And I think one thing is that everyone will know that CR hockey is very child-centred, and everything is then based around them. So I think the proof's in the pudding, just seeing with how many people are out there playing around this ABC Council area, it's unreal. Like,
absolutely. So, and I think like one of the projects that we're currently looking at is around club experience and gaining insight from the environment and where we coach. And that might be a really useful conversation to have with some of the young participants or some of the parents, to ask that question. What is it that they're enjoying? What is it making these sessions fun and engaging and so on? Because that allows you to maybe understand some reflection on your own coaching.
No, absolutely. Look, there at the end of the hockey camps every year, I will put out a survey monkey thing, and we'll just ask what positive criticisms, is there anything that we could improve on? And I mean, like, we had near 250 responses last year, and the most of them were very positive. And it's just like, the kids go because they really enjoy it. They feel that, that the coaches care for them. They're meeting new friends and things like that. So, no, I do try to, get a wee bit of buy-in from the parents, and try to see how we can always strive to do it better and better.
Fantastic. And Steafan, seeing yourself, is there any, like, obviously I know you're really into your PhD at the minute, so I imagine a lot of that's making you curious in terms of the research side of things. But is there anything in the wider coaching spectrum that's making you really curious right now?
Well, the PhD, primarily the reason that I sort of got involved in it was I was doing a bit of lecturing with the university last year, and they had mentioned that this project was coming up, and the likes of Leanne Sharp and Gavin Breslin, I've had them tortured for the last 10 years about the areas that I'm sort of interested in, but none of those sort of came up. And whenever I'd sort of seen this one about the social environment in sport, that ticks all the boxes for me, because ever since I've sort of been involved in coaching, that's this thing that I've always been curious about. Whenever I was involved in Club NI, and even in terms of the primary school coaching, I've always sort of been drawn to what makes teams and individuals successful. How do they reach the top of their sport and the pinnacle, and what was the structure, what was the journey that they went on? So just recently there, I heard we hear that there's 12,000 people or 12,000 children that are in academies in England, yet only 1% of those get through and make it into the professional game. Okay. So in terms of what we were talking about previously about performance and health outcomes, I feel that academies have been doing fantastic. Well, you question that they're doing their job in terms of performance outcomes, but I just feel in terms of up until sort of recent years where the EPPs come in and there's sort of a more of a awareness about the whole holistic package of youth development that's been neglected. And you see there with the young Man City player, unfortunately, took his life there before Christmas, and I just feel that, are we doing enough? And in terms of the children that I've coached, I always feel that that personal development and everything's the most important. So in terms of sort of areas currently that Christine just mentioned there about your coach, athlete, parent triad and stuff as well, and I feel that's an area where there's so much work that can be done in terms of better communication between teammates, better communication between parents and children, better communication between coaches and parents, and so on. So I've been kind of drawn to like reading on the likes of Paul McGinley and the European Ryder Cup team, the All Blacks, and various like Michael Phelps from an individual sport perspective, and how they sort of set up that motivational climate or empowering climate, so that you're developing children as people as well as athletes. So sort of like you hear now about like the adolescent sort of, it's usually like seen like as a bad word nearly whenever you talk about adolescence. Whereas like really, if we think about it, there's so much that can be gained from it in terms of they're an age where like they are looking to take risks. They're really creative. They're maybe wanting to break away from that, like from parents and so on, have some independence. And I feel that governing bodies and sports, we aren't doing enough to have them involved in their own learning. So sort of involving them in the whole sort of preparation and execution and evaluation phases of performance, for me, is something where I feel that we can sort of then like develop self-confidence and perseverance and all those things. Michael?
Absolutely. And, you know, I think you had a very valid point there in terms of that balance between health and performance. Where do you think that's stacked? Is there a balance right now? Or is it very heavily weighted towards the performance side?
I'd say it's 80-20 in terms of performance and the well-being side. I think like I heard a podcast there recently where a fellow Owen Eastwood, who's worked with the England football team currently and he previously was with the Team GB in the Olympics, and it's all about developing identity. And the groups that he's worked with, Springboks and stuff, he was with as well. But he feels that over the next sort of 10 years, we're going to see like team climate, team dynamics as the major growth area. And through that, I hope that you'll see sort of like these sort of ignored health outcomes becoming like front and center of what every team's about. Because there's no research out anywhere that says that you can't have performance outcomes alongside health outcomes. Like in fact, it says the opposite. If you have positive health, you will have positive performances as well. So I think that's where we're going, like hopefully in the future.
And even leaving that aside, there is a duty of care there. Any like you used, that Manchester City example, which we hope we never see that again. And I think there's a duty of care to make sure that during, as you say, a really a moment to change in someone's life in adolescence, that they're really well looked after and really, really well supported.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And like even like I'm a big follower of Liverpool, like yourself.
Yeah, that's why we asked you on, to be honest with you.
The line's breaking up, Steafan, there. I don't know what's going on.
Back off, man. You didn't want to be coming on now with your Man United stuff here. But in terms of like Jurgen Klopp, like it'd be very easy for people on the outside to criticize him this year with everything that's going on in terms of performances. But I guarantee if you're looking for the definition of what a transformational leader is, he ticks all of the boxes. Like there's so many factors at play, but for somebody that's just looking at the outcome of results, they're not looking at the pandemic. They're not looking at the lack of fans. They're not looking at the fact that they've gone on like a 3-year sort of relentless pursuit, chasing Man City and achieving what they've done. They're not looking at the fact that they didn't get like a good pre-season under their belts. They're not looking at the fact that there's been major injuries and injuries to like the leaders in the team as well. So that affects it majorly in terms of like the whole collective sort of efficacy in the group. And like you've seen sort of suggestions there that there's disharmony in the group of Salah and stuff. I honestly think that Klopp does such a good job at keeping things in house, and you never ever hear like you heard like Jose Mourinho there last week talking about questioning Spurs players whether they have like the basics of motivation and stuff. Like, I just feel there's like polar opposites between him and Klopp, where like Liverpool are currently in a struggle, and as well as that,
the responses
are totally different.
Listen, I get what you're saying. I don't think Simon does, though, by the look in his face, but we'll not get into that. In terms of your learning, I'll stick with you here, Steafan. In terms of your learning, what's really been the most profound or the most memorable learning experience that's impacted your coaching or your development over the years?
Well, I've obviously learned loads from like coaching courses. I've been on all the ones in football, from youth licenses up to A license, and I've learned so much from like the coach educators, but also the people that you share those courses with. And I think it's such a valuable tool, sort of sharing experiences and even learning from professional footballers in terms of like what they've gone through, and getting sort of like bits of gold dust from them in terms of their experiences. But actually, in terms of the sort of most significant experiences I've had have been like whenever I've been involved in like sport and ice stuff, or involved with like Ulster GA, and we've done like development with like coach educators from outside of our sport. And I feel that's kind of served me well over the years, where I've always been looking at different sports and different coaches, and the likes of John Wooden, the likes of Pete Carroll and Steve Kerr and Phil Jackson, like reading books on those. I've felt that that's where I've kind of helped shape who I want to be, rather than simply going on a UEFA B license and sort of being given directives of this is how it is and this is the kind of coach that you need to be. I feel that we have to like sort of get outside of our comfort zone and look at other sports, because there's always lessons to be learned there.
And I see you're, based on those examples that you threw out there, you're again gravitating towards those transformational leaders, who I would certainly class all those people that you've just mentioned in that group.
100%. And for me, like, I always think, like, if it's football that I've been coaching predominantly over the years, if I'm coaching a child or a player who has 1% chance of making it, then I want to make sure that if they don't, that I've prepared them for like a life beyond football. So even if they don't become a professional athlete, that whenever I see them in 20 years time or whatever, that they're having a life that they're happy with. So developing all those, like the 4 C's, and that we'll chat about later with Côté.
Brilliant. Thank you, Stephen. And Christine, just over to yourself then. In terms of your own learning and the most important learning experiences that you have experienced over the years, is there anything that jumps out that said, right, that made a real difference to how I coach, to how I learn, to how I've developed?
Yeah, so just one thing we were talking about there, Steafan sort of alluded on it, was the 1% that maybe make it. And in the podcast, John, so he said the dangers of focusing on elite performance and prioritizing children's long-term success at the expense of their immediate enjoyment. And I suppose it's at CR Hockey is that, albeit we will run maybe once a year, we'd run the academy, so we will, but and that's where I take the best kids from each school, and we'll have like a 6-week program just to give them a wee bit more I suppose of a challenge, where the rest of the time is just purely focusing on the immediate enjoyment of for the kids. But when you say about learning, most significant, well, for me, every day is a school day, always learning. All kids are unique, they're all different, and, coaching, I mean, you might have to tell a child one time, you might have to tell a child a few times, and then sometimes we need to adapt our coaching styles, whether we need to talk a wee bit more about it or demonstrate. And one of the most significant things is that as a coach, that I have to be patient, as sometimes we're doing things in hockey and I think, oh gosh, this isn't working, but I haven't given it enough time. Okay, so I need to learn then for my patience, and when you do have patience, then they do get it, and then it gets better and better.
Yeah, absolutely. And like a lot of what you're talking about there is around experiential learning. So actually going and doing something and taking that away and having to think about it, and why did I say that? Why did I ask that question? Why did I do that demonstration? And what did it mean for that person, and what was the outcome? Yeah, absolutely. Learning on the job, if you like, or learning in situ, I think certainly for me, that's been one of the learning outcomes is thinking about something, going and trying it, observing how it's went, and then taking that away and reflecting even more.
Yeah, so like when we're working within the, the 16 squad, is that we'll always talk about the WWWs and EBIs. And even though that's at Ulster 16s, I'm taking that into CR hockey. So I'm thinking to myself, well, what went well, all right, and even better if. So we try to stay away from the negative, oh, I can't do this, or how do we make it better? Well, even better if we do this or do that. And we're taking that into the younger kids and asking those questions. So yeah, it's.
And has there ever been a time where something didn't go to plan for you, but it's actually turned out to be a really useful learning curve?
Yeah, well, I suppose we can talk about this year as probably being the most challenging with the pandemic. We haven't really got to have face-to-face coaching with the kids. I thought to myself, what am I going to do? So I turned a negative into a positive and started doing Zoom hockey online with the kids. And then every Friday, then I would have had a Friday challenge. And because the kids see me all the time, or they did see me all the time, what I did then was I got different coaches that I know. And we must have had about 9 coaches on each session going through skills. So we had that online, and then that took me out of my comfort zone. But again, I learned a lot from that. That I suppose you have to have a plan B if the plan A didn't work.
Yeah. Absolutely. One of the elements that we're going to look at in a second here, and I think Simon's got some really interesting questions for you just to challenge your thinking, is on supporting positive outcomes in sport for young people. So Simon, you might pick us up there and just take us through into that one.
Yeah, cheers, Michael. No pressure on the really interesting questions front. We'll see how we go. We'll see how interesting they are. Steafan, we'll come back to you to start. So as Michael said, and I know we've sort of referred to it a couple of times through the start of this podcast interview, and I guess in some ways that this was the reason that we wanted to do this podcast, was that you had both been on the webinar that we hosted with Professor Jean Côté, and we were really excited to have him join us for one of the events. So because you both joined us, and we were thinking, let's talk to some coaches about actually what did that mean, what were the bits that they took away from that, and what were things that maybe could be shared with others who weren't part of that session. So firstly, I think just to start with you, Steafan, was there anything that that you had initial thoughts on, or anything that jumped out you straight away from the session before we get into the details of it?
Well, in terms of the webinar, I loved it. Like I was just sitting there thinking, like, I think nearly an hour and a half, 2 hours had passed and just flew in. But everything just that John had says, like, I was in full agreement with. But I came away with a lot of clarity in terms of my own coaching, in terms of what I'm doing. Like we spoke previously about whenever I was in the IFA, it was predominantly participation based during the day, taking PE lessons, and then performance based in the evening with the outcomes. But like personal development was always something that I felt that needed to be developed all the time. However, I felt just whenever I was in the performance sort of situation that was maybe taking a back seat more than I'd have liked. So following sort of the webinar, I just kind of felt that if I was in that situation again, so whatever environment I find myself in future, I think I would be more sort of confident to not let that go. So to not let personal development fall at the expense of performance, and likewise the whole three of them, participation, performance, and personal development, should all be sort of seen together. Even whenever I talk there about delivering the PE curriculum and its participation, I'm 100% trying to develop performance. Like at the end of the day, you're trying to develop their competence, confidence, connection, character in that setting, as well as you are in the performance setting. So I don't feel that everything needs to be sort of seen in single strands. They all are interconnected and woven together. So that was sort of the big thing. I felt as he was chatting and he sort of broke everything down that a lot of the sort of the 4 C's that he talked about, I felt that I'd sort of done a decent enough job at doing that and my own coaching to date. But I do think in the sort of the society that we live in, it's like really, really unique. And you sort of see that now even more with Brexit and the sort of fallout from that. And although we've had like the Good Friday Agreement and stuff, I still feel that we live in a divided society, and sport really mirrors what we see in education and socially and politically. And I feel that sport can be that sort of vehicle they like sort of shape the next generation. And I feel that it simply isn't just a case of going out and coaching a team. It's developing them as people to sort of be prepared, like sort of for the next sort of generation that they have like a healthy future.
No, absolutely, Steafan. I think, as you say, sport and education in particular are 2 things that bring kids together here from different backgrounds, which is truly amazing and does give it a lot of power. And the 4 C's that you're referring to, for anybody that's listening that isn't familiar with those, so the 4 C's Stefan's referring to are competence, confidence, connection, and character. And we'll dive into those in a little second. Thanks for that. Christine, if we were to come to you, anything that you drew out from that session in particular with Jean Côté?
Well, like as Steafan says, I got as he did, get clarity in his own coaching, I did in mine, is that, I was much more like the second clip. So there was 2 clips, and the first one was very adult-centered. It was very, it was too competitive. It was all about the winning. It was very intense. And to be honest with you, it made me feel a wee bit uncomfortable as a coach. And then the second clip for me, the kids got the immediate experience. They enjoyed it. It was very child-centered. And what I took away from that is that, maybe I am doing something right, because my sessions are very, very child-centered, and you want them to come back to every session. You want them to have fun. You just want them to play. You invest your time in them. I value them as the person and also as a performer. So
no,
sorry,
go ahead.
No, sorry. No, you go on ahead.
No, I was just going to say, no, good stuff. I think that from both of you even listening, that aspect of clarity and confidence in what you were doing, I think is, if nothing else, that's a really good thing. Yeah.
No, well, definitely. And we did talk about it a wee bit about the 4 C's. And I mean, that's one thing that, during the week at schools, I would take those kids for like maybe a 10-week coaching program. And in those 10 weeks, I would be very hopeful that I did deliver competence, confidence, connection and character within those 10 weeks.
No, great. That's great stuff. So we're going to dive into the detail of it a little bit now. So we've touched on the 4 C's and explained those a little bit. So Jean talked about 3 dynamic elements of appropriate settings, engaging in activities, and quality social dynamics as the key in developing those 4 C's. So we're nearly going to take each one of those as a go to sort of finish out the main part of the podcast here. So Christine, we'll start with you this time. Yeah. So in your coaching, how do you structure the coaching environment that you create to make it appropriate to the needs, age and stage of the young people that you're coaching?
Okay, so when I'm taking them in schools, it's fairly easy as they come out in their classes, so they're all going to be the same age. So they are most of them, I suppose, key stage 1 haven't really played much hockey. They've probably been around all the same sort of ability. The school facilities are fairly good, but some can be small for the number of kids. And if that is the case for them, what we would do was we'd split the kids up. So, and we'd go for a shorter time then, but I mean, it's better quality of coaching. So we would change that if we need to. you know, the wise old saying is that there should be no queues unless in the alphabet. And for me, that is a big thing. Seeing kids standing in queues and not getting as much time in the hockey ball is a bit of a pet hate for me. So I don't like that. In terms of if we need to make the pitch smaller, we do that, and make sure that the kids' hockey stick sizes are the correct size for them. If we need to use a bigger ball, we will use a bigger ball.
Yeah, no, spot on. I think there's some things I definitely want to dive in with you about in terms of the individuals within those groups, but we'll pick those up within the other two questions. Come back to you in a sec. So, Steafan, yourself, in terms of the environment, anything specifically you would do to set up to make sure you're shaping it around the needs and things of kids that you're working with?
I'd pretty much just echo a lot of things there that Christine said, to be honest. I think, thankfully, having an undergrad degree in sports studies and PGC as well, with like a PE specialism, I've kind of been schooled and made aware of the sort of different needs that are set out for each age group, and making sure that you sort of go through the curriculum in a correct manner in terms of that in the school setting. So that's then sort of helped in the club coaching setting as well, in terms of making sure that everything's in terms of equipment, pitch sizes, that stuff that you're using that's at their developmental needs. But as well as that, I always think how much will they get out of this? Like, is it fun? If it's like for the younger ones, if it's not fun, then really, like, why am I doing it? Because if there's something you want to get out of it, you can always set it up in a fun way. Is there lots of like serve and returns? So am I asking questions and getting responses back from them, or is it just a case of me setting up these sessions and telling them what to do, and I have no idea whenever they've left if they've actually enjoyed it or if they've learned from it? So for me, that's a big one in terms of questioning and feedback. I feel that there has to be plenty of opportunity for that, while still making the session very like interactive, and there's lots of intensity and stuff at it as well, that it's not too stop-start all the time.
No, good stuff. And I think you started to take us towards personal engagement there as well, around how do you, and you know, the Department of Education funded program with IFA and GA seems to have been like a great breeding ground for coaches to gain a lot of experience in those situations. And different people I've worked with have seemed to have really taken that. But how do you, in a program like that where you're working over a period of time with the same group of kids, what do you do that creates diversity in their experience, or variety, or makes things different to keep them engaged and interested that way?
Well, the beauty of that is you're taking the full PE curriculum. So a lot of people, I think, sometimes make the mistake of thinking that if you're an IFA coach that you're in there delivering football, or if you're an Ulster GA coach you're in there delivering Gaelic. Like, that wasn't the case. You had to deliver everything. So like, I had as much fun whenever I got to the basketball stage for the key stage 2 ones as I did taking football sessions. Like, I actually met a parent in Asda there last week who I didn't know of, but I had sort of recommended that her wee girl went in athletics club, and because she was unbelievable whenever we were doing long jumps and high jumps for PE. And I tortured her, says, look, I want you to sign up to the athletics club. And every week she'd come in and say, have you signed up? No, I've asked my mummy, she hasn't taken me. Next week, go ask her again. And eventually the mother did take her, and the mother told me there just when I was chatting and asked her that she just wanted to say thanks, because the wee girl's now like an Ulster champion in athletics, and if she wasn't getting pushed, she would never have taken her. But because I was in the school and being able to sort of recognize the maybe skill sets she had, then that gave her that opportunity. So for me, I didn't care what sport or what pathway people took, as long as they sort of developed that lifelong engagement in sport. So there was children in there who were never going to play at elite level in any sport, but could make unbelievable volunteers for a GA team, could be amazing at like performance analysis. So as long as I left there thinking every single child in the class, that was my aim anyway. Every single child to come away saying, I really enjoy having Steafan and taking us for PE. That was it. And then you're hoping then that whenever they go out to their clubs and stuff, that they're driving them forward in terms of coming through the ranks and progressing on, that we have that sort of retention, that they're not dropping out at 11, 12 whenever they start to move to secondary school, and we lose so many then. So that would have been sort of a big bugbear of mine, that you have them filled with confidence and that they're wanting to like go out there and experience sport in the community, and you're maybe chatting them then a couple of years later and they haven't enjoyed it. So I feel that there's a lot more to do that way.
Oh, it's absolutely super messages coming across there, Steafan, around child first, sport second, definitely, which is, I'm sure, I can see Christine nodding away as well, and knowing Christine as well. I'm sure that comes through in her sport as well. So Christine, we're going to jump back across to you now and ask you the same question really around variety, because you are coaching same sport.
Yeah.
How do you keep that with the same group of people? How do you keep so much variety and engagement, as I know you do?
Like you said, like I'm more hockey specific as opposed to Steafan there. He was in the PE curriculum and they were doing lots. And I think it's brilliant the kids do sample all different skills at a very young age and different sports, but I'm hockey specific. For me, just make it a real fun learning environment. Fun. If they don't enjoy it, they're not going to come back, and that is my number one thing. But we say fun learning. Like I would introduce lots of games instead of doing drills. We'll do games that you're still getting the same outcome as the drill that you were intending to do, and kids just love that. They love a challenge. Like I think John said in the podcast about making an environment where kids can win and lose, and I try my very best to do that, but you can't win all the time, and sometimes you're going to lose, and it's how those kids react to that as well. But yeah, the engagement, the good thing is that I'm seeing those kids every single week. They're coming back every week, and for the main reason is, well, their friends are there, they've made new friends, they enjoy it. And they enjoy it because it's a fun learning environment always.
And Christine, some of the stuff you talked about there, when you start talking about games, anything in particular you look for when you're designing games? Because I think that's quite a challenge. I think lots of people will agree with you and think, yeah, definitely. If I could design a game that would do that, what do you think about when you're trying to design a new game?
So say for example there, right, where you're doing passing or whatever, right, and you're just passing to me, how boring. So what I do is, well, I'm sure you're the same too. You put a game of 10-pin bowling down and you're still getting the push passing, you're running with the ball, you're introducing teamwork. So that's one of the games that would be playing 10-pin bowling. Another one would be flip-flop, again, which it would be all about the passing and the teamwork and the dribbling of the ball.
No, great stuff. And Christine, to finish with, and we'll go across to Steafan in a second here. With that set of questions, you talked at the start there about the kids. You've got an advantage sometimes in the schools. The kids come in, they're in an age group, and they're coming together, and maybe hockey's new to them, so you've got that sort of advantage to them. But there's all wee individual personalities coming through there, and I know for a fact, having seen your coaching, that you'll be working across those different individual personalities to really engage them and build great relationships with each of those children in the group. How do you do that, and how would you give advice to somebody else to try and do that?
So, like you say, I find it a wee bit easier because I'm seeing them every week. I think Armagh is quite a small community as well, so I do know quite a lot of people within the Armagh area, and I know their parents. Like, I mean, I would coach in around 1,000 kids a week, and honestly, I know every single kid that I coach. Because for me, then it makes my coaching so much easier. And not only that, is that they feel important. Oh, Christine knows my name, or Christine tries to involve me. Like if I getting stuff out of the boot of the car at club training or whatever, you know, I say, come and help or bring it down, you know, so you're sort of building those relationships up. I've created an environment where they're able to ask me questions. They're not afraid to ask questions. And if I have a passion for it, well, then I feel that shines through on them, and then they will love it as well. I just don't coach them, I value them, and I've got so much time for all the kids that I do coach.
Brilliant. Thanks, Christine. So Steafan, in terms of the building relationships part, coach participant relationships, any top tips from you?
For me, like, relationships is probably the key driver in coaching. So like, in terms of the interactions that you have, like, I feel that whole social identity approach that I was talking about earlier, and identity leadership, I feel if you can get your group to buy in, so like sort of drawn on that sort of like self-determination, if you've like developed your autonomy and competence and relatedness between the group themselves, between you and the individuals in the group, between you and their parents, then you're more than halfway there, because you've got that buy-in. And if you involve them in the whole sort of decision-making process, I feel like sometimes as coaches we're maybe scared to ask the questions, like, so what went wrong? Okay, so what now? What we do, like, sort of using your sort of reflection methods and like looking at performance and not being sort of afraid to like delve deep into like failure. Like sometimes I think we're all like afraid of failure and don't want to mention it. It's just like success and success only. But at the end of the day, like, everybody fails everywhere in life. Like there's nobody in life that hasn't failed at something. So I think we have to sort of like develop that sort of psychological safety. I know Michael's getting big on that one at the moment. But I feel that in terms of like people say about resilience, it's social support. So if you want to have like your athletes who are resilient and stuff, then they've got to be comfortable knowing that you've given them the license to go and express themselves, if it's football, whatever you're playing, that they're not afraid of risk taking, they're not afraid of something going wrong, that like if they're maybe like an under 13, under 14 team, that it's not about success at this moment in time, it's about learning, moving forward, failing forward, so that you're giving them a better opportunity to sort of progress in the like senior sport.
Brilliant. Thank you, Steafan. One last question for you guys, and we just want to thank you for engaging. And this is the last question of the afternoon here. Everyone on this call seems really committed about keeping youngsters involved for the long term and giving a more holistic experience. What's the one tip that you could give to other coaches out there that you have found has helped you keep people involved, keep youngsters involved for sport over the long run? Christine, starting with you.
Okay, so my top tip would be love what you do. If you don't love it, the kids are not going to love it. And put the child at the center of the learning process. And I think if we can do this, well, then we will create good kids, whether, you know, not just at hockey, but in lots more things as well.
Brilliant. I agree totally. And I think that enthusiasm and that love for the sport needs to be, really present in the coaches.
Absolutely.
If it's not present in the coach, then it's hard to get the kid to, really.
Yeah.
As well. And yeah. Steafan, yourself?
Good question. I think in terms of like what I could sort of suggest, I feel like that it all sort of comes down to the relationships and passion. In terms of what we're wanting to offer children moving forward, like I can't remember now who said it, but like there's a Harvard lecturer who says it's not about like what you've done in life and what accolades or whatever or degrees or whatever you have. Like it's that simple sort of saying, like children don't care what you know unless they know you care. I feel that any person that comes under your supervision, you should look at every one of them as if they're your child, whether that's an under 5 team or a senior team. And how would you like them to be coached? And if you are looking at everybody under your supervision with those eyes, then you'll not go far wrong. Like, because like we have to set up that sort of climate where they want to be there first, and that they have all those sort of drivers of your competence, your 4 C's that we talked about, competence, confidence, connection, and character. And if you're able to sort of hone in on those, and you're able to like sort of develop their motivation, that they then sort of self-regulate and they look after their own performance and they're keen, they sort of like constantly learn, then you'll just see them flourish. So like we talk about like sort of like self-actualization and like your hierarchy of needs and stuff. If you can sort of put those things in place, that sort of climate where they're not afraid, where it's like we've seen examples in sport where like toxic environments where the US gymnasts and stuff where it's just totally wrong. But I do feel that we're now seeing like a shift where the coaches that are coming through from grassroots to professional game, that they're people-centered, player-centered. And for me, those are the sort of 2 things that I would say, like passion and relationships are like, if you're a passionate coach, then that'll like, you'll get back what you give in terms of the correspondence, the sort of connection you have there with your team.
Brilliant. Guys, thank you very much for your answers, and thank you very much for taking the time to chat with us here this afternoon. Always really delighted to have these sense-making conversations about webinars that we have ran. So it's been great to have you on today. I wish you all the best of luck in the future, getting back on the coaching field as much as you would like to whenever we can. And stay safe and be well.
Cheers. Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Thank you. So, Michael, another really interesting coaches, 2 coaches. Well, certainly I've known both of them a long time. You've known Steafan a long time. What did you make of that conversation?
Yeah, it was really fantastic to get people's insights. And like, as we often say, we're just here to have a coaching conversation, and that's definitely where I went this afternoon. For me, it's really, and we talk about this a lot, is that whenever we deliver a webinar or someone's been on a learning experience, how can we take that even further and supplement the learning? And having a sense-making conversation about some of the concepts and principles is so important. I think we've been able to do that, albeit on a podcast today. For me, there were numerous differences to both Christine and Stefan's approaches. One thing that was a real big similarity, though, was that their desire to make sure that the people that they were coaching got a holistic experience, that they felt connected to the coach and what the coach was doing. And that shone out for me as a similarity between both coaches. Was there anything that you picked up?
Yeah, I think, Michael's very, very similar to you. I think from Christine, she talked about everybody knowing that when they came along to her sessions that they were going to be child-centered. And I thought that was brilliant, actually, because people, and I know that to be the case, that people have, or that Christine's coaching has a real clear identity and expectations of the parents and the children that come along to it. They know what they're going to get, and it's all very positive. And then again, building on what you've picked out from Steafan as well there. Steafan talked about transformational leadership, and I actually think you could see principles of transformational leadership in how Steafan outlined his coaching approach, and how he works in the different environments that he works. I thought Christine actually left us with a really simple question too, that right at the very start of the podcast, which I think is essentially what this podcast is all about, and which was, how can I be a better coach? And I thought that, it's a fairly simple question to ask, but it can be a fairly difficult one to answer at times. So I suppose that's a question to leave everybody with.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think these coaching conversations hopefully are igniting curiosity in the people who are listening to them. And we're certainly igniting curiosity in ourselves as we continue to have them. All the listeners out there, thank you very much for tuning in. We hope we're bringing you some really interesting, insightful conversations with coaches down the line here and across Northern Ireland, and some people who are from Northern Ireland but are maybe influencing different systems. We appreciate your listenership, and we'll continue to bring you episodes on a regular basis. Thanks. Bye.
Curious Coaching is brought to you by Sport Northern Ireland. We hope that this episode has sparked some curiosity for you and your coaching. The future belongs to the curious.